Hi friends and family, this is Fantasy Football 101. Today we're going to have a brief overview of what fantasy football is. We're going to talk about some of the basics of how to play fantasy football, and we're going to take a quick look at what a week in your life as a fantasy football player might look like. So this video is really only for you if you've never played fantasy football before. Maybe you only have a little experience playing fantasy football. So if you just joined a league and you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? This video is going to help you answer that question. Okay, so what is fantasy football? Basically, fantasy football is a game where you have the opportunity to pretend you own a fake football team. And your fake football team is going to be comprised of actual players from all over the NFL, and the things they do on a weekly basis will hopefully get you lots of points. So everyone else in your league is going to be doing the same thing, and on a weekly basis you're going to go head to head with someone else in your league, and whichever of you manages to get the most points that week will win that matchup. At the end of the regular season, the 4 teams that have won the most matchups will go into the playoffs, and the playoffs determine who the champion is for your league, and hopefully it's you. All right, so that's fantasy football. So how do you play? All right, well, everything kind of starts with the draft, and I'm not going to go into great detail about the draft because we're going to have a whole video dedicated to drafting. Basically, I'm just going to say right now that the draft is going to be something that happens at a particular point in time determined by your commissioner, and you're all going to get together either in the same room or virtually. You'll all be online at the same time, and you're going to take turns picking the players that you want to be on your team. At the end of your draft, especially if you draft in the ESPN standard 10-team league, your team should look like this. Except the nice computerized version, it won't look like a third grader did it. All right, so you'll have a quarterback, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, a tight end. You'll have someone in your flex position, which can be a wide receiver, running back, tight end, whoever you think is going to get you the most points. You'll have a defense, and the defense will be the entire defense from an actual team. So maybe you'll have the Patriots defense. And if you do, anything any player does on that Patriots defense, as long as you own them, you're going to get the points for. That's the defense, and then you'll have a kicker. And that's your starting lineup. Those are the players that you're actually going to get points for. You're going to have other players too, 7 more, and they're going to be on your bench, not really doing anything until you need them. So you're going to see how many points they would have gotten if you had started them, but you're not going to get any credit for them unless you move them into your starting lineup. So that's what your team's going to look like. So why do we need these bench players? Basically, because stuff happens. So injuries happen all the time in the NFL, as I'm sure you know, and sometimes players are out for just a week or two, and sometimes they're out for a long time, and sometimes they're out for the entire season. So if your star running back gets injured, you're going to be really happy that you have a quality player on your bench to replace them with. So injuries are one reason to have good players on your bench. Another reason would be poor performers. Every year it happens. Somebody in the NFL who's anticipated to do well really is a bust. So you don't want to pull the trigger too soon, but if consistently week after week they're underperforming, you might want to think about replacing them with someone on your bench who's doing particularly well. So poor performers, bench, and then the most important reason to have players on your bench is the bye week. So basically in the NFL there's a 17-week regular season, but each team only plays 16 games. So as you can see, that means that each team is going to sit out from playing for an entire week. So starting with week 4, which is when the bye weeks start, you could have 1, 2, 3, 4, or more players, God forbid, who are on bye weeks on any particular week. And you need to have people on your bench, quality players on your bench to replace them with. So those are the reasons we have, and in ESPN you have 7 bench players, which is nice. All right, so how do these guys get points? Basically, each position has several ways they can get points. Check your league settings. If you go into your league settings and look for scoring, they'll really break it down for you how each player is going to get points. Basically, some of it's common sense, like your running backs get points for rushing and your wide receivers get points for receiving, as do your tight ends. Quarterbacks get points for things like passing, but not at all. Don't get any points at all for handing off the ball to a running back, so keep that in mind when you're thinking about what quarterback you might want. Players can also lose points. When a quarterback throws an interception, they'll usually lose a point for that. Any player who loses the ball to a fumble might lose you as many as 2 points. Players who run backwards and then get tackled will lose those amount of yards that they lost. So yeah, your players can lose you points too. Kickers get points for things like kicking the extra point and for field goals. And your defense, special teams get points for a million things that we're not going to go into them all right now, but basically it's like sacks. If they return a fumble or a punt or a kickoff for a touchdown, they get points for that. Blocked kicks, safeties, stuff like that. The most important thing to know about your defense is they can also lose you a lot of points. If they allow the other team to get too many points, they start losing points, and potentially as many as 7 points can be lost. Same for if they allow the other team to move the ball a lot of yards. They can lose a lot of points for that, up to 7 points. So the defense on any given week can be your best friend or your worst fantasy nightmare. So just a heads up on your defense. So that's it. Those are the kind of things that your players get points for. The best part is that everything I just told you, you don't have to know any of it because the computer's doing all the work for you. So it's going to like figure out how many points each player got on a weekly basis. It's going to do all the math, figure out who won the matchup, show you how the standings are in the league, all that stuff. You don't have to worry about any of it. So what do you do as a fantasy football player? What does that involve? Basically, your job as a team owner is to set your team. So you want to set your lineup on a weekly basis. Players might be out due to injury, bye weeks. Like I said, there's plenty of underperforming players to go around. So it's your responsibility to replace those players that are either out or not doing well. They make it really easy because you can do it on the computer. So the way it works at most of the fantasy football websites is if, like, let's say you have this running back, they're injured, you're going to get 0 points for them if you leave them in your lineup that week. Click on that running back. The players on your bench who are eligible to replace that running back will be illuminated. Click on one of them, they switch plays. Easy, easy. So very user-friendly. And basically that's it. So you're really just responsible for for managing your lineup, who's in your starting lineup, and moving those players around. That's really it. So what a week is going to look like for you as a fantasy football player. We'll start on Thursday. Basically, the NFL week starts on Thursday with the Thursday night game. It goes right through Sunday with all the games that go down on Sunday. And then it finishes up after the game that's on Monday night. So you want to check your lineup on Thursday, replace any players that need replacing, figure out who you want as starters, and you know what? There's a good chance that you don't even have any players playing on Thursday because it's just one game. And in that case, if that's the case, you don't have to do anything till Sunday. So the next time you have to look at your team again is on Sunday for sure. Check out your team Sunday morning before kickoff. Make sure that everyone's where you want them to be, that the players that have the best chance for getting you the most points are in your starting lineup. And then again on Monday, if you have any players that are playing on Monday, do a quick check. Make sure you're all good to go. Just a quick note that if you know a lot about football, you probably already have a lot of opinions about who's going to get you the most points, who's going to be a good performer on a weekly basis. If you're really new to football as well as to fantasy football, you might not have any idea. Don't worry, because you'll get recommendations from the website, from the platform that you're playing on. They have rankings and projections and tools like that that can help you figure out who's going to potentially get you the most point. And the fact of the matter is that no one knows anything for sure. So people can be, give you educated guesses, and that's about as good as it gets. So use your own gut too, because you have a good chance to be as good a chance to be right or wrong as anybody else does. All right. So the only other thing I'll mention is that on occasion, you might have a player who's injured and out for the entire season, and you really should replace that player. You shouldn't take up a spot even on your bench with a player who's out for the rest of the season. So that is one of the reasons, and there's others, including underperformance, why you might you might be thinking about getting rid of a player completely and pulling in another player from either a player who's not owned by any team in your league, but all of a sudden they're performing incredibly well. Or maybe there's a player that another team owns, but they're not really using them. They're on their bench, but they could help you out tremendously. So there's tools called waivers and trades that we are going to go over in depth in another video that you can use to bring fresh blood into your team. And like I said, we'll talk about that another time. I'm just mentioning it now because we're kind of going over the kind of things you'll have to do as a fantasy football owner, and perhaps putting in waiver wire requests or trying to initiate trades with other players. Those can be some of the things that you want to do also. So really, that's it. The thing to remember is that it's a game and it should be super fun for you, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be. Only put in as much time as you can feel good about, or as little time as you can feel good about. Basically, if you've signed up for a league, you've kind of given your word that you are going to set your team on a weekly basis, and at a minimum you should be doing that. All the rest is up to you. So yeah, just have fun. The next video in the series is going to be a video about drafting, and so I'll see you over there. In the meantime, take care.